Hey, gentlemen and ladies, welcome once again to Take It Alive. My name is Ndubuisi. Ekekwe. Please just confirm that you can hear me and I'm audible enough. Thank you.
We are hearing you live and clear.
Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Okay.
You are very audible. You can hear
Yes,
you.
Prof.
Okay, great. So welcome and welcome once again. I'm Ndubuisi. I'm connecting here from North America. I want to also send my condolences to people in the beautiful Nigeria who are affected by the vagaries of flood. Our understanding is that this problem continues to be a major one, many communities, villages, and across the nation. So we put all of you in prayers and hopeful that this problem will be managed very, very soon. So our apologies and our sympathies and our condolences. So today we will be having a conversation on topic protecting and growing wealth through inflation and currency deterioration. It turns out that the flooding issue that I just noted here could also become, I would say, a very, very, very big factor in the inflationary challenge Nigeria may face, not just this year, but also next year. Because if farmlands are washed off, the implication is that next year we are going to have lesser supply. And what we mean by lesser supply is in the sense that the total capacity of our farm produce will drop. And if ceteris paribus, as they say in mathematics, if the demand remains, of course, demand will continue to rise, since there will still be more children, more hands to feed, more mouths to feed. It means, and the supply going down, it means that this inflation can also continue going up. So inflation is basically when things become a little bit more expensive, that what you used to buy for 100 naira, instead of that thing costing you 100 naira, maybe costs you more than 100 naira. And currency deterioration in a simple form is what we are seeing comparing the Nigerian naira, for example, and the US dollar. If you used to exchange, let's say, dollar for 500, maybe last year, and now you have to spend up to 700 or more to exchange. So we say that a currency is just deteriorating, which means that it is just falling apart. And that means that contracts cannot easily be signed because, hey, who is going to sign a 10-year contract on Naira? It's basically an own goal because you're signing it when the dollar may be 500 Naira per dollar. By the time that contract has to be executed or finalized and essentially terminated because it has reached to the final destination of its lifespan, who knows what Naira will be. So how do you now look at protecting a little fund you have? How do you also, even in that midst of paralysis, how do you keep growing so that you don't just pause your life because of many factors that you cannot control? So, of course, we understand that this is an academic class and we're in a classroom, and I don't want you to see this that is an adversary, something for you to start making investment decisions. Let's have a conversation because Tekidia Institute, we are a school, and we have here to look at postulations and look at frameworks, model processing systems that hopefully we can co-learn and then we can apply those principles as necessary. So I'll begin by telling us one thing. I'm using Nigeria here, of course, it extrapolates to other parts of the world, Africa, of course, but this is constant, that there are challenges everywhere, there are frictions everywhere, there are many, many issues. We just noted Nigeria, people have problems with flood, people have problems with clean water, because there's just so many issues from Nigeria, Mali, Gabon, United States, Russia, Ukraine, Iran. They're all frictions. And we've also noted in this program that there is one mechanism of overcoming those frictions, and that means that companies have to be established to solve those problems. We say that the promises of politicians are opportunities for markets because politicians don't build companies, and companies are the vehicles upon which our problems are solved. Yes, the government may be the one paying the contractor for the road, but there needs to be a road construction company. The government may be the one that is, paying for the school fees, but there needs a company called a university where people have to be trained. So at the end of the whole, every statement, every policy initiative, or any policy statement has to be executed through a market system, and that market system goes through what we call companies. We established here in this program that you have the demand and supply. There are problems people have in the demand part. Supply is trying to provide a solution. And when both of them can come into an equilibrium point, transaction takes place. And that equilibrium point most times is defined by price. You want 20 oranges. Somebody has 35 oranges. And if you buy the 20, the person is not sure that the other 15, anybody will buy it. Quickly, you are in a position to negotiate because you know that the demand for that orange, which has excess supply, is not great. So you cannot say, hey, madam, you have 35 oranges. I'm the only one buying. Hey, can I just buy the 25? I'll pay, or can I mark it down? But if in a scenario, you're looking for 20 oranges, in the whole market, there are only 5. It means here that demand is more than supply. Now, it becomes a supplier's market because the seller will say, hey, these people, they're all here looking for oranges. There's no orange. I am going to now make a decision. If you live in the village like I lived many years ago, and my mom, she was actually a petty trader, and what they used to do was very, very early in the morning, they will stay, because you're coming into the Oriental market in Abia State. There were some other women that are bringing plantain, bringing gare, palm oil from many rural communities around Ovim, because in Abia State, Ovim has one of the largest markets compared to the neighboring communities because it's motorable, it has a very good road that successive governors, we have 2 governors from the city, from the village, they build very good roads. So from Ukweke part, from Acha, Mpa, other neighboring. So they come very early. Sometimes they will trek up to 4 hours just to get to the market. So what do? They just have money, buy those women off so that they can start going back because they need to walk back 4 hours back to their rural communities. So when they now buy it, by the time it's around 9 a.m., people from Umuahia, Aba, Enugu are now coming to buy. They are no more buying from the original producers. Rather, they are now buying from those middle women who are very, 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 very brilliant women because they're also taking risk because you could buy all those things and there is rainfall. And if there is rainfall, the people in Aba may not come. Or so they have to do all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to price. Early in the morning, the price is always high. By the time we come back from school, around 2:30, 3 o'clock, if you have a lot of demand, a lot of supply, that means you have a lot of plantain, you have a lot of palm oil. The question now is, you need to sell this thing in the next 1 hour. Otherwise, you have to take it home. And that is a bad thing because the next major market is 8 days. You know, in Igbo, the count a week is 4, but the major weeks run over 8 days. So you can't preserve the plantain. So they now say, let's mark it down. They mark it down so that those going from Wahia will buy. Now, on the other hand, you could have a wonderful market where there are just not many supply. So at the end of the day, price was playing a role. And that price is based on availability of supply and the demand mechanism. And I've already noted here there are so many elements that can affect that. We look at capabilities. How are we having people to produce the supply? Because those are really the products and services. And we look at here so many factors. And at the end of the day, you create that product. That product, that service is what is taken to the market where people that want things now come to buy. And when we're talking about market here, don't just think about the village market. We're talking about supermarkets. We're also talking about leverageable funds, the one they sell in Wall Street, Goldman Sachs kind of leverage. This is all markets. It's not just physical markets. These are all kinds of markets. But at the end of it, even if you have packaged all the bad debts, all the bad credits in America, you package it as a product and want to sell it to somebody, that is still a product. If there are many people that are ready to buy that terrible products for you, but good product from others, because what works here is that you go into to the market to buy all the bad debt. You can see people are not paying their credit card debt. People are not paying their mortgage debt. You say, hey guys, what is the total bad mortgage you have? You say, hey, it's $100 million. It's okay. Can I pay you $20 million? I own over those 100. Your model is that you have a special skill or talent to actually go into the world and get and recover a big part that is more than 20 million and your expenses. Another person says, hey, don't worry. You just got that 20, I'll pay you 30 million, I own the 100 now. So that is also a product. The more people that are interested in buying, the more you, the supplier, you have a position in the market. Before the last major recession in the world, there was what they call the subprime mortgage. Subprime mortgage is basically giving people that don't really have money to pay for house at a very stable level, but you just still give them mortgage, hoping that miraculously they will keep servicing the debt. But people were ready, if those guys are coming in, we just buy them. So at the end of the day, nobody wanted to buy because many bad things happen at the same time. And when many bad things happen at the same time, the supplier of that debt could not sell because there was no demand. The same thing happened when the price of oil went negative during the heart of COVID-19. People that were selling oil, the market traders, all of them, they could not find people to buy from them because there was no demand for oil, because factories were closed and everybody was not talking about how to be buying oil. Rather, people were just talking about, how can I even live? Am I sure I'm going to live the next week? Why do I have to be trading for something that will happen in the next 20 months or whatever? So you need the supply, you need the demand, but at the end of the day, there is one X factor. We're going back to economics 101. Or if you attended a great secondary school, you must have learned about this thing in your JSS1 in economics, where they have demand, they have supply. And remember that course in economics, defining the definition of economics. I remember who memorized this thing many years ago. Economics is a social science that studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. That was the Professor Lord Robbins' definition of economics. And if you break down Professor Lord Robbins' definition of economics, one thing that was evident there was this, that this demand and this supply, and you look at the non-natural philosophical angle, because this is social science. You can't predict everything because it's not physics and chemistry. You see that the relationship, how demand and supply comes down, and economists have modeled that relationship in what they call price. If the demand is high and supply is constant, what that means that price will go up. And if the supply is very, very high and demand is stable, what happens? Price will go down. Of course, there are different kinds of products. We have learned about inelastic demand, elastic demand. We're not just going through that. Let's just use the nominal construct. So the equilibrium point is how this weighting becomes, and that is determined by price. Now, it now becomes extremely magical. Using Nigeria as a case study here, of course, it applies to other parts of the world. When the demand is high, demand is really high because Nigerian population has been growing faster than economic growth. That means that Nigerian population has a higher, Nigerian economy has a higher demand than the growth of production. And that growth of production can be interpreted as the total supply of goods and services in terms of supply that is going into the market. So demand is high. So if that demand remains high because the population is increasing, growing faster than the supply of goods and services, it means technically that price has to go up. So population growth faster than economic growth. So what do we have? We have demand moving up, price moves up. And once that happens, many things will now begin to happen. And our problem is not even that demand is high. The problem is that even the supply itself is going down. Not that supply has stabilized. Supply is going down because of issues like banditry, issues of security, issues of even the bad roads, just like this flood that unfortunately has happened. So at the end of the day, you are now breaking an equilibrium point where price continues to go up. So if you now want to buy potato, Akwa Izobone, you want to go to Jankwano Terminus Market in just those days when NYC, you want to say Akwa Izobone, say, hey, Zobo, now you want to buy Zobo, you want to ask how much is Zobo. You just realize that the Zobo you bought yesterday is now totally more expensive than the one you bought last, and the one today is also more expensive. So at the end of the day, you're just broken. And on the supply part, supply has gone low because COVID depressed production. Remember, there are many economic systems that when you look at them, they take about 3 years to mature. The car, if you buy a new car today, all the gadgets you see in that new car, most of them were finalized 3 years ago. What happened was there is a standard that essentially looks at all the parts in a car. There are standards, they have to be set. If it's an accelerometer, gyroscope, precision, the lifespan, like a gyroscope has to stay for 15 years before it can break. All those standards are met. Now, the companies that make the components that are now supplied to the car makers like Toyota, Honda, Tesla, they would have finished those designs and about everything around 3 years ago, and all the certifications gotten. So you have major 3 companies. They have Conti, we have Bosch, which is a very big European company, and you have I've forgotten the name of another. There were major 3 companies, Conti, Bosch. They supply all these car parks. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that during the time of COVID, if in that process these companies could not do that thing because of lockdown, what that means is that you've added, let's say, 1 year in their production system. It's like people that make plywoods for construction of houses and buildings. You may just go there and buy that plywood, but the seasoning process of that plywood, sometimes it takes months before the real tree, or whatever you call it, is turned into a plywood. It has to go into seasoning. If you're going through Tombela Bridge, if you live in Lagos, by the right hand side of you, you see some lumber materials that people put on the lagoon. What is going there, unfortunately, is not, Nigeria doesn't do it well because it's not supposed to be done that way. It pollutes, it causes all terrible odor. But what they are doing there is actually going through a seasoning process, making it possible that that wood, or whatever you call it, that tree, can now last for more than 40, 50 years when you use it for your roofing. So, but it has to be on that water body for more than sometimes 6, 7 months. So if they did not cut the tree, that supply of the plywood cannot happen instantaneously even after COVID. So during COVID, the cutting of the trees were not done. The seasoning of the tree, it wasn't done. So even when we came back from COVID, you need a gestation period before these activities can now come back to equilibrium point. Now, take it into reproduction systems like silica, where they now go into the ground, they pick sand, turn it into microprocessors. There are many processes that are involved for you to turn that silica into what we call silicon wafer. You get the silica, it goes through the Socratic process of rotational process. At the end of the day, you have the ingot, which are now processed into metallurgical grade silicon into the electronically grade one that are now used in microprocessors and the microfabrication laboratory. So if they have not picked up the silica, they would have not done that. So COVID affected that production system. Of course, we already know the challenges of balance of trade and balance of payment, and that also has a very massive implication on also the supply. The balance of trade means it can be positive or negative. Nigeria, unfortunately, has not been having it very well because we import more things than we can actually, that we export. And then the same thing happens on the total payment we receive and the total payment we send out. So at the end of the day, I don't know anybody who is running a company here, you realize that if you need a raw material that is largely used not necessarily in the typical sense of sourcing it locally in Nigeria, if you go to work, 99% of your efforts, if care is not taken, is talking about how do I find more dollar to import? You just go to work, you want to be looking at your factory, how your men and women are working. Your problem now turns out, which bank do I call whether they have dollar? So as you are now focusing on availability of dollar, you are becoming less productive. And once that happens, it can also affect the total supply. So of course, there is productivity gap. The gap includes electricity and all kinds of things. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say here is demand is rising, supply is dropping. The only thing that happens is that price will rise up. And when prices of items are rising, what happens? You have inflationary pull. And that means, but now, because of another factor, prices of goods it's supposed to be goods, sorry about that. And because of the another factor that during COVID, the government pumped so much money into the economy. You don't blame the government. That's what they call the Keynesian economic model, that if an economy is in a state of stasis, it's not moving. One way of solving that problem is to push more money into the economy so that you can ignite growth. And when you ignite growth, what happens? You can now overcome that paralysis. So during COVID, government printed a lot of naira, gave money, and did so many, and then there was just massive oversupply of naira. And that massive oversupply of naira means liquidity was really, really there. Everyone, the people that had money had more money. And because they had more money, hey, it means that supply of naira was huge. They could spend it anyhow. But now government say, wow, too much money in the system. People are just buying things they were not supposed to. How do we do that? We are going to increase interest rate. Interest rate is the fee you pay when you borrow money. Now, what that means is if the rate is high, the tendency for you to go and borrow, you're going to think about it. Am I really interested in going to borrow that money at, let's say, 27%, compared if interest rate is 7%? If interest rate is 7%, you are in a better position just to go and borrow that money without thinking about it. But now it's 17%. Hey, are you sure? 27? No. So what government does by increasing interest rates is to reduce liquidity of how much money that is available in the system by inherently making it for you to think deeper whether you want to assume that cost of that money. So interest rate, CBN increases it. That means the cost of borrowing rises. It means that if your company is borrowing money to buy raw material, is borrowing money to finance a development of a new branch, to open up new subsidiary or drive R&D, company will say, well, we cannot absorb that interest rate. And if we cannot absorb that interest rate, let's forget the expansion. Let's forget about that growth. So what that means is by increasing interest rates, you put a pedal on the growth of the economy. It is a very important thing to do in a period of a massive level of inflation. And it's very, very key. In short, I hold a doctoral degree in banking and finance. And I specialize on currency and in Diamond Bank, and understanding how economic systems and currencies, how they play a lot. And it turns out that the key thing there is you have to do this thing in a way that it affects both the consumers and the corporate world. But that is where there is a major difference. If you understand the lending system in Nigeria, for example, or most parts of Africa, excluding South Africa and Egypt, I would say, you will realize that interest rate increase, I hope that there are bankers here when we go into question and answer, does not necessarily affect the consumer markets in Nigeria. Because how many of us actually have access to credit as individuals? So, because most of the citizens don't even get any loan from their bank, when you increase interest rates, you cannot directly influence the performance behavior of your consumers because they never really have any credit. We're a cash-based economy. If you want to build a house, you go and build a house and save money and build it. There's nothing like going to take a loan from a bank to build it. So, but if you go to the United States, they have what they call Federal Reserve, which is their own central bank. When they increase interest rates, they can affect the corporate world, these are companies, and they can affect the consumers. Consumers are like individuals like us. And corporate ones are like companies like Zenith Bank, Meta, Google, and Microsoft and Amazon. These are the corporate world. Nigeria breweries are not corporate. US can affect consumer and the corporate because US has one thing. US has a very, very solid consumer-based economy. So what happens is this. As soon as government increases interest rate, which they have been doing over the last few months, the cost of your credit card goes up because the interest rate now changes. So that's the way the banks do that. They say prime rate plus the fee. So if you look at a credit card credit percentage, have what they call prime. And what that prime means is no matter what the government has said the interest rate, we're going to add our own percentage. So if they say prime rate plus 9.5%, that means if the government has set up 4.5 as the interest rate at prime, they add their plus 9.17%. So when the prime goes low, it also fluctuates. So what has happened here is that through the rate set by the central bank, they can influence the amount of risk in terms of the fees people will pay on their loans. It works, but in Nigeria, we don't have that. So this is where it becomes very interesting because even the CBN increases rate, it does not affect the consumer directly. It only affects companies. You know what happens? By increasing the rates, companies will now have to borrow more, borrow at a higher rate. And if companies are forced to borrow at a higher rate, most of them will not. You know what happens? The supply of goods and services drop because the companies that you would have expected to have the capacity to improve supply because of the higher rates, they will not invest. So lower supply of industrial goods, consumers spending is largely not affected by our rate policy because we don't have enough consumer credit. So at the end of the day, the more the rate goes up, the more the total supply goes lower because companies that are supposed to have access to resources, but this is not to blame CBN. It's a very, very difficult decision because the central bank has to balance these factors. So at the end of the day, the lower supply, even when demand remains high because the population is increasing, price rising. Purchasing power is dropping. At the end of the day, everything is now entwined. The currency is now affected. That the 1,000 in 2000 is no more 1,020 in 2002 and things like that. So you are now in a massive inflation regime where money cannot buy what it used to buy. And the government is trying to fight it by increasing rates. But as the government is trying to fight it by increasing rates, government is not fighting you because you never took loan to start with. Government is fighting companies that take loan. As those companies confront higher in bank interest rates, they stop investing, they stop expanding, thereby affecting the availability of the supply, which would have been used to calibrate out by boosting supply, normalize the growth of demand. It is one of the biggest problems we have in the developing world. And that is why managing a developing world economy is exceedingly very, very difficult. The economic models you build in the United States, in Western Europe, is totally not useful to a large extent because their own economic architecture is totally different from yours. So what would have happened here is that if you look at the papers for the economists, I guess in CBN, and they will now have to build their own model. And so we need to get to that inflation. So just rounding up so we get it question. So there's so many factors that affect this inflation. I just missed of them here. And but the simple thing here, you need to have supply if you want to overcome. If you cannot increase supply, even when demand is increasing, you are being a very, very difficult. So the question now is here, how do you now overcome inflation? How do you overcome inflation? So I'm going to make it a little bit academic. I don't want people to start opening your wallet and start trading. No, we don't do that here. This is school. So price is up. Naira, fortunately, loses value. That means if you want to buy Indomie noodles, the cost was 100 Naira, now it's 110 Naira. Or it's still 100 naira, but if you look at the package, instead of being 50 kg or 50 milligram or 50 whatever, they have reduced it. So you can still say it's the same 100 naira, but the quantity has been reduced. So those are little things companies do because they are trying to model your inertia. Because if do they reduce the quantity or do they increase the price? Most times they reduce the quantity. So if you count the number of biscuits, as we say, cookies inside our box, it used to be 30, but now it's 28. But the price is still 20 naira. You will not worry, it's still the same 20 naira, but the number of biscuit inside our box has dropped by 2. And they will use that to calibrate out the impact of that higher cost of production. So what do? Eurobond. Eurobond is basically a standard bond. There are companies that have this amazing thing. They say, okay, we are going to issue a bond, which is you give us money on a specified interest rate. We'll pay you at a social time, and that money will be paid in US dollars or British pounds or euro. So it's not going to be paid in naira. And what that means is they have to figure out how to do that. They have to pay you in dollars because you are investing in that Eurobond, a standard bond. It could be a company like Dangote Cement. It could be a company like MTN. I think big blue chip companies do that a lot. So let's say, hey, we're going to pay you a certain percentage for every $1,000 you give us. We're going to pay that money in USD, maybe 3, 4, 4 years, depending on. UBA just closed one of their big ones. Many banks do that. Zenith Bank. I think MTN is also running one. So Eurobond is very, very key. So you can also invest in public equities. But in these public equities, you now need to look for companies that can outperform the inflationary rate. So Nigeria's inflation, the top line, the core inflation, they like to confuse us with those terminologies, hovers around 17-21%. So you need to now look at equities. These are companies and stocks in the stock market that are actually doing more than that. There are not many of them. Where you can find extremely great companies, I'm not recommending anything, gents. I'm just a village guy. But one thing I would say here, if you go to companies that are involved in agriculture, like palm oil, these are the companies that are performed. There's so many of them in the palm oil business that have done very, very well. So if you have companies that outperform that percentage growth of you can be fine. But there are not many of them. Some other people also, because of the influence of the currency deterioration on your balance and your portfolio, people like to invest in US equities, like US stock markets, invest in London Stock Exchange and things like that. But the problem there is those ones have not actually done well. I mean, Facebook was worth close to $1 trillion about 12 months ago. I think it's worth less than $350 million. In other words, if you have invested $1,000 in Facebook 12 months ago, by now, what you have is going to be $350. It's not up to $1,000 anymore. So the same thing happens with Apple. The same thing happens with all these other companies. So that's the good news for you. It remains the US dollars that currency deterioration part is. So there are so many companies in Lagos and across Africa that are helping people buy foreign stock, buying stock exchange. Now, this is really one of the coolest ones, how to manage inflation. You buy real estate, but this real estate is not the typical type of buy and sell. Because the problem with real estate is that the liquidity is it's always a challenge because you need rich people to come and buy it from you, and there are not many rich people. So you have a real estate at 150 million naira, you're expecting to sell it, may take you 3 months because there are not many people at 150 million naira. But if you rent it, that means that if the inflation goes up, you can also increase the rent because you are spending more on, you assume you are spending more on maintaining the property. So people can overcome inflation by investing in real estate, especially in this space of renting. Or real estate investment trust, in short, Intekidia Capital, that is a startup we are investing in the moment, which is doing the rail. So we believe vividly that as we look at the trajectory of the Nigerian economy, and what we see here is some of these fundamental root causes, nobody is attacking them. And we just see that it's just, even in the next 20 years, even if you start doing the right thing from tomorrow or next year or next 2 years, that we are really, really way behind, that there are so many marginal opportunities that one can capture before they get caught up. So, of course, you can also invest in tech startups. And if they work, I'm telling you, they look very, very good. You know, we have one from our experience at Ekekwe Capital that you have very, very great, amazing companies. You look at so many of these tech startups, the ones that work, they can be exceedingly very, very great. You know, I've explained it here that I have this company called Kuda. When Kuda Bank, they came to raise money from, they actually wanted me to invest $100,000 to them. So I came from US to give a speech in Ikeja. That was this hotel in Ikeja, Radisson Blue or so, call it. And they waited for me all day. And that day I was with Professor Salami from Lagos Business School. There were some CEOs from the leading banks in Nigeria. Two of us were to organize a business seminar. So Professor spoke, I spoke, we just helping them to some bank CEOs and others to co-learn with them. Not you can't teach those legends, of course. So they waited. Say, hey, can you just invest? I said, well, I don't understand how you can run a bank and everything is free. Gentlemen and ladies, that was a very dumb thing I did, because if I had given them that 100K and that money would have turned out to be up to $2.3 million at the valuation they gave me, because the valuation that time they gave me was around $3.5 million. And in less than 18 months, the company moved from that less than 4 million to $500 million. Look at the multiple. Just take 500, multiply it by another 10, that gives you 50. Multiply by another 10, that's 500. That means that was 100 multiple. That means that forgetting dilution, if you are giving them $10,000, that 10,000 would have multiplied by 100. What are you talking about? That means that in less than 18 months, in paper, you've turned $10,000 into $1 million. But after dilution, maybe you could be getting around maybe $400,000 in less than 18 months. So when they work, you become a genius. In short, that is the reason why some young men in New York, after they have done one great trade, they just relocate to Bahamas. So it's also a great thing, but it's very, very risky because the money can just vanish. Yeah. Or the worst part, you keep your money in your dorm account. I personally did that. And when in 2000, January, COVID was signals coming. Just look at, what are you going to put your money? I said, no, I just convert every naira you have, just put it in dorm. And that seems to be a good strategy, because I was modeling there's nothing you invest that will beat, unfortunately, the deterioration that you capture. So if you put it that time, that was around 450. If you just go and sell it back, get naira, you'll be getting about 700. So, I mean, again, this is not a patriotism clause. This is a business school. And I'm hoping that we get it. We're not asking people that, why don't you believe in your country or currency? Nothing like that. We're in school. And of course, you can do that. There is no column in balance sheet, a profit and loss statement that has patriotism. What is there is credit, debit side, and then you have to balance everything in between. Of course, you have to do the right thing, but you should not be blindfolded. So I've also noted here, I'm rounding up here, just trying to check the time here, so that we're going to question and answer. But everything you do, as you try to fight this inflation in Nigeria, pay attention to technology. That's one of the things I would like to point out here, that if you look through here, you can see that in the United States, steel companies were dominant in 1917. And then 50 years later, infrastructure companies like IBM and AT&T, the telecom companies, were also dominant. Now they have these knowledge companies that are really the dominant companies in the United States 50 years later. So you can move from steel, agriculture, move into infrastructure companies, and now moving into knowledge companies. We believe vividly, but if you go back to that old postulation by Pythagoras many, many centuries ago, you notice that one thing is consistent, that humans, societies, economic architectures are going to move towards data systems, because Pythagoras said that the world is nothing but numbers. And it means that in the near future, Nigerian companies African companies, the most valued and the most dominant, are not just going to be technology companies, but they're also going to be data-powered companies, because that is essentially what the Pythagoras, during one of the finest moments in his thesis, say that the world is number. And he's been proved right by looking at the economic architectures and the models that we have around the world. So if you look here, you see that these are the largest companies in Nigeria. They are still infrastructure companies. You have the Dangote Cement, Dangote Bua Cement. Bua Food is also here. You have food companies, can imagine, and you have telecommunication infrastructure companies. Then American largest companies are like these. Like I also note here that Tesla is not necessarily a car company. If you look at the business of Tesla, Tesla is just like Apple. It's just like, instead of making iPhone, it's making a car. But if you look at the business of Apple, it is a knowledge company. It is making more money on services these days than it's making on iPhone. That is the reason it doesn't even report how much iPhone it sells, because the number of iPhone that it sells is not as important as the services that it makes. So Tesla is the same thing. If you look at the balance sheet of Tesla and look at the one on let me say, Toyota may be generating maybe 200, 300 million billion dollars revenue, but Tesla may make a small amount of that. But the difference here is that of the 1.2 million cars Tesla is going to sell this year, close to, I think Toyota will sell more than nearly 7 or 8 million all over the world. Every car that Tesla sells today will be earning revenue until that car goes to the landfill, because of software subscription, renewal license. But if you buy Toyota, you bought Toyota. So these are knowledge companies, and these are the largest companies in America. It means that we believe no matter what happens, Nigeria, Africa is going over in the near future. The leading companies will become better companies, like looking at FlutterWave, looking at CUDA, looking at all these startups. They are going to evolve to become the dominant companies. And the impacts are already felt here. If you look at the market valuation of the largest bank in Nigeria, Zenith Bank, I think it's around 630-something billion naira. And GTB follows it, GT code, call it now. It's about 536 billion naira. This is, what that means is really ridiculous. The last money that FlutterWave raised at 3 billion, you can buy Zenith Bank and buy a GT Bank and still have change. I mean, it looks very ridiculous. But what is happening here is that there is a massive dislocation in our world. And that is, I'm not going to spend time here, but one thing we know, that innovation is still going to be stable, but technology is going to be a driving element empowering that innovation, because we are just at the first wave of the innovation society. And that means that if you want to overcome inflation, that's what I'm trying to come, technology is going to be your denominator, because I believe that the empires of the future are going to be powered by technological systems, because they will change the world and bring sheer prosperity to many people. So thank you so much, gentlemen. That was what I have for you here. And hope that you added a lot of insights and perspectives that can help you now look back to your own personal portfolio as well as your own career. So let's go to Kadak Ward. Ask your question, please. Thank you.
Prof, I'm selling shares. Hello, Prof.
Yes, David, how are you?
I'm fine. I said I'm selling shares because my company is a technology company.
No problem. No problem. So yeah. You know, you guys are doing amazing stuff in Sierra Leone. And yeah, we'll be very, But you know, you're in Sierra Leone, but you make all your money in Nigeria. And you've not told us how you come to Nigeria and make tons of money. and I think we need to find out what the secret is. Yeah. So go ahead with your question.
So my question is this really an inflation that is going to lead to the leverage in the sense that the debt cycle has increased and it's having an effect because governments can't keep up? with the new model of increasing interest rates, whilst also funding unemployment and trying to also stimulate the economy, and what I think is a gap and could be a solution to this problem that we're having across the world is building a digital twin of the economy. I think if, for instance, we do that building block by building block, African countries individually building a digital twin of their economies, then we'll be able to see how to cut spending, print money, borrow more, and use that, to solve the economic problem. But as it is right now, we don't have enough global economic data. What we have is few economic data that we have to manage. How there's a huge economic opportunity. How do African countries, step in and take advantage of the fact that if we build a digital twin, we can see our economy all through, and we can know how to cut spending, print more money, balance that with borrowing, and all the rest. And so, from the perspective of an investor, how do you see this inflation and eventually maybe the leverage or an austerity, giving opportunity to companies in technology that could, invest in data and generation of data?
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. We are doing guesswork as a policy, but I try to be very careful not to let it look like we are respecting those that are serving. After all, some of us are not in government serving, and I see that as a service and a call. Yeah, if you do not have the data, most times it's just a guesswork. And when you drive your policy making with guesswork, you hardly get to the level where you want to be. There are very good, great policies that we have in Africa, but the problem is that we don't even know which one is working and which one is not working, because we don't have the data to know which one is working and which one. And let me give you a very good example. The Central Bank of Nigeria managed, I think from 2011 to 2011 to 2014, 2015, early part of 2015, the currency was stable. And largely under the same, I would say, the same person who is the governor of the central bank. It was stable. People may say, oh, maybe the oil price was high. That was not necessarily the main factor, because the oil price could have been high. But if you look at the budgets of Nigeria, I think the last budget that Jonathan, under his administration, did was around 9.2 trillion naira or so. But this one we are doing now is, this current one is hitting 21 trillion or 22 trillion. So if you did not get money from oil, we are getting money from borrowing. So whether Naira was borrowed or Naira came from oil, it's Naira. So my point is that at the end of the day, we did not know, and no one has written comprehensively how we're able to stabilize the Naira over that period of time. It has nothing to do exclusively on the oil price. Now you go back to the Abacha time. 1998, I was still a student in Futo for my undergraduates. And that guy, I mean, nobody says it, nobody is allowed to say anything good about Abacha. But that guy managed Naira wickedly great, I'm telling you. He managed Naira, he stabilized the whole thing. But because we hate, I don't know what he did, but everything he did on Naira worked. But the problem is, can you go and say that Abacha did something right? Maybe somebody will attack you on Twitter, somebody will say, but if you look at what he did within that period, if you look at the lexicon, because when I now finished, I was working on my finance doctoral program. I look at some academic publications, and you see what Abacha did. That didn't work. Naira did not shift for the time he was there. Period. So that was the time you see Naira, people can sign long-term contract in Naira, and banks can even give you a loan for 4 or 5 years. But now we now move into a state, no bank will give you a loan now more than 3 months because they don't know when Naira will end. So what you're saying here is because we are running policies, government without data. And when you do that, you don't know what is working and what is not working. And until we have an analytical approach to how businesses run, it's just like Tekidia. If you go to our website, tekidia.com, the blog, we used to have a very deep, dense image. Can make it 1,000 by 2,000, but we realized that when the images were so high quality, traffic would drop because it was eating a lot of bandwidth for people that are visiting from other parts of the world. So we now have to reduce the quality of our image, making it, they made it now, is it 800 by 450 peso? Because you are not making the site for Americans. You're not making it for British. You're making it for a young man who just loaded 2,000 Naira credit and he wants to get online and read something on tech. And he doesn't want, by the time he downloads read one blog, the image has already taken all the 2,000 Naira he loaded. So, but without that measurement, you'll be blinded and blindfolded. So that's where we need to fix it. But Rwanda has shown us that it's doable. They measure everything. And because they measure everything, that is the reason why they say, hey, this is not working. You know, I've shared a lot of pictures with many ministers in Rwanda. I spent a lot of time there working with them. And in short, if you go to Rwanda now, all the universities are under one vice chancellor. At the time, 2014, I was there with the Minister of Education. We're looking at how do you reduce cost. Hey, why don't you just turn all these universities, have one vice chancellor, do the university system they do in California? We are, instead of having 7 different universities, 7 different bosses, 7 different dean, 7 different, everything replicated by 7. You can talk the National University of Rwanda, Nuru, turn the Kigali Institute of Technology in Kigali, make it the engineering school, have them under the University of Rwanda, and the end. I know what, at the end of the day, that's what they did. And the vice chancellor of that university, Professor Nosa Igebo, who is basically the person that runs he was my advisor during my master's program in the United States. And they hired him. And before they hired Professor Igebo, you know who was there before? Professor Ibrahim Ogu, who is a professor in, that's where my wife studied, she studied in Scotland. He was her professor. So I have so much understanding of how these people will just come. They hire exclusively most time Nigerians. They go hire Ghanaians, Kenyans, because they feel that these are extremely exposed. But what I'm saying, but they use a lot of data. They say, okay, we are cutting 27% of administrative costs, and we can now put more money in schools. Today in Kigali, parents are putting their children from private school, putting them in public school, because the public school are doing better than the private school. So private schools in Kigali are folding up in primary and secondary because they don't have customers. Not a miracle. They use data to drive it. So we need data, and you say digital infrastructure is going to be part of it because you cannot run data system without digital infrastructure. From mortgage to agriculture to housing, Africa needs to build a data-centric company. And I'm hoping that your company, as what you're doing in Sierra Leone, go in Africa, while we continue to play a role there. So let's go to Eric, please. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever. This is very interesting for me because there's something we're working on currently. And I would like to ask, since this is a school, I have a professor, can I have the one-on-one with my professor? That's my first question. And then my second question, it has to do with the current inflation rate. Now, you spoke about the current banking rate the interest rate that has been increased, and that does not really affect the end consumer as it were. But ultimately, if you look at the entire the way things are going, the people who bear the brunt of the higher interest rate by banks are the end consumers at the end of the day. Now, if we also look at investing or hedging your funds so that it's not eaten up by inflation, by the ordinary man or the consumer who still earns his 60,000 naira. However, his purchasing power has reduced. What are you advising in terms of looking at where this person needs to put his funds to either hedge the funds or, generate some kind of return on investment that is not going to be too risky? If you look at the startups, most times, I don't know which of them do you want to even go to? How do we know that they are doing well? Because most of the time you will get the data from, in public domain, and we're not sure how well those informations are. How do you advise this person who is still earning to hedge his funds and then to also put it somewhere that can generate interest that is not going to be eaten up by inflation? Because if inflation is at probably 19%, if I'm correct, and I'm going to be getting a return on investment for 5%, I think it's a bad deal ab initio. So I don't know, Prof, how do you advise? So, but my first question still stands.
Okay, yeah, let me say this, that of course, there's just no way I can be so specific on this. Like I noted, the startup one, if you read The Richest Man in Babylon, they say, if you are looking for a carpenter, go to someone who understands how to be a carpenter. If you're looking for a bricklayer, don't go and look for a surgeon to do the work of your bricklaying. There are people that understand this startup thing. Look for them. And if you look for them, they will guide you. But hedging your inflation by investing in one simple way, you can invest in Eurobond. Eurobond has no risk, provided that the blue chip company that is providing it is, if MTN, for example, has an Eurobond where they will pay you in US dollars, if you invest today, they will say maybe in 3 years, they'll pay you back with interest. There's just no way you are going to be extremely imperiled, because there is high level of chance that MTN will still be here. And companies that issue these bonds before they are approved are not baby companies. These are companies that are extremely well trusted, and before the Security and Exchange Commission will approve them. So if you go to asset classes that are already regulated and approved by the government within the Eurobond, you will find. The only issue that Eurobond is fixed interest income. Maybe they'll say they pay you percentage. You just know it's predictable. It's not going to give you the alpha. The alpha here, you're not going to beat any major benchmark. And so it's low risk to a large extent, but it doesn't deliver at size return. The stock market, unfortunately, the chance of beating even the deterioration of the currency and inflation makes it very hopeless. Yeah, but there are equities that are paying dividend. Look for those ones that pay dividend. My own personal strategy, it's that what I do, it's to buy dividend paying stocks. And those dividend paying stock, but not just to buy them and just forget about them. And every month, every year, they will be sending alerts. And I think I do, let me just share here, and just to, because I like to make, if you run these are actually credits. I do get a lot of, these are bank, it's my dividend. Sometimes they just keep coming. You don't even have time to be checking. I can just keep rolling. These are my dividends from the Nigeria Stock Exchange. I've invested a couple, and that was when, and there was a time I was at that level. Let's be looking at how do you make sure, even if you're retired to your village, you are sure every year, you are sure that you can get maybe 20 million naira, so that no matter what happens, you will be fine. Now I have passed that stage, so I don't invest in Nigeria Stock Exchange anymore. But I have investments that are dividend paying. So what I would suggest to beat it, even the appreciation of the shares of these companies may not go high, but if they are paying dividend, like Dangote, I don't want to mention names, just bear with me. They pay a lot of dividend. And that is also one way of making sure that no matter what happens, whether the thing rises or not, you're getting dividend. That can help you take care of your kids' school fees. That can help you pay your rent. And it's like every shares, most 99% of the shares I have in Nigeria, I bought them during my first 3 years of working in Diamond Bank. I had what I called a strategy where 20% of my salary went into buying shares. And my plan was just to secure that, and I bought dividend paying stock. So since more than nearly how many years now, more than 15 years or so, they're still paying those every year. And that money have run into millions, and I don't touch them. Yeah. So, but you have to come up with a plan. I think next week we'll be looking at how to look at portfolio. I think I'll be sharing some examples. It's not a perfect, things work differently for people. And you hopefully when I share that, you can learn something from it. And I will encourage young people that you have to pay yourself before you pay fashion, before you pay whatever. If you can pay yourself, investing at least 10% of whatever you earn on some of these things, it makes you to own your life. What do I mean by owning your life? I have freedom over labor. I don't have to work for any human being for many years. I don't have to work to teach in a school, because the little money I earned in the first 5 years of my career, the way I manage it gives me freedom that I can try anything I want. But I know there are people that would like to try so many things in their careers. They cannot, because they are tethered to the next salary. And that inhibits them from living their lives they want to live. So investing and planning could actually help you become, if you're looking at becoming richer, become richer. But you have to plan it, because you need to have freedom from ability to say, this job, it has been great, but I need to move to the next level. And you are not worried, how can I pay the school fees? How do I pay my rent? Because those things, you've taken care of them. So we'll come back to that next week. Hopefully the lecture that we'll do that, we'll look into that. So let's go to Nadi, please. Go ahead. I think we just still have about 12 minutes to run.
My first question has not been answered, bro.
Okay. Yeah. No, if you want to have a chat with me, just reach to admin, and she will find a way. They will find a way.
Thank you.
I'm hoping.
Thank you,
yeah, just get back, please. I think that should take care. Nadi, go ahead, please.
All right. Good afternoon, Prof, and good evening, fellow colleagues. Prof, thank you very much. Always an insightful one. This is one of the lectures also we like, the lecture of money. So this question, I'm trying to see the best way to put it, but I think as I'm trying to crack it, you understand. As a state, as a country, what is multiple taxation the best strategy of growing an economy? When there are things like investment in knowledge, knowledge companies, and the talking about the data company as well.
No, I think I understand your question.
So just like
I can answer that directly. Yes, I do.
One more thing, that in order to also complement the question, because a certain governor in Nigeria is being rated for his ability to grow the revenue of the state, to a particular level. And I'm saying is, and that revenue was through multiple taxation. So I'm saying, in order to buffer the economy of a nation, should it be through multiple taxation or creation of things like knowledge economies, in order for prosperity, to come?
Yes. Yeah. Let me say this: the people that are actually running multiple taxation is also because they don't have clarity. You see, there are just like the question Kadap Ward or the comment Kadap Ward made here. Our problem is not that government intentionally wants to run multiple taxation. I have a picture here where a governor met me in New York and asked me to come to the state. And I went, the plan I flew into to see him. And I said, okay, this is your commission. Everyone said, okay, what is the problem? They say they want to internally generated revenue. I said, okay, internally generated, how will you do that? So we need to impose more tasks on people checking into hotels. Want to put tasks. I said, okay, how do you know the other parts? The local government is taxing, the federal government is taxing. How do you know how much they're already paying? So we don't care, we just want our own. So the problem here is without visibility, everybody is a victim. What do I mean by a victim? The government itself is a victim in the sense that the local government must have imposed something. They don't even know who is collecting and what they've collected. The federal government is also trying to collect VAT, collect its own corporate tax. The state government feels that there's something there for me because they are not handshaking, they are not talking to one another. And there is also no way of knowing if the people you are sending are actually collecting this money. The only thing they do is they just take a game of chance. Let's tax those that we can tax, and we use that to compensate those that we cannot get access to. So at the end of the day, a very small percentage of the taxpayers will now bear the brunt because a huge number of taxpayers are not taxable. Nigeria's budget is $42 billion. South Africa's budget is 157 billion. 157 billion. So the South Africa's population is 60 million people. Nigeria's population is 210. You cannot tell me that Nigeria's budget of 40 billion, 42 billion is how we are surviving. What happened is that Nigeria's wealth is in the hand of the citizens and not in the hand of the government. So if you combine the wealth in Abia State, I mean, go to Ohafia, go to Abariba, see the kind of mansions these guys build. Or if you come to my village, where people build things you can't imagine. You go to Anambra, you go to Abeokuta, you go to most parts, even if you go to Uyo, people build. Nigerians' wealth are in the hands of Nigerians. But in South Africa, the wealth of the South Africans, government has a part. How? Every land, every house in South Africa is taxed at the beginning of the year. So that January, if Nigeria does that, your local government may end up receiving at least $10 million from property tax in your local government. The other local government will receive. So by the time you put that budget, you may end up seeing the Nigerian budget will actually be up to 200 or more than the South African budget. But today, only 42 is at play because that's what government has access. The other ones are in the hands of the citizen. But you may ask, why would somebody now go and give money to government when they have not judiciously used the one? That is a very valid question, which is people willingly pay tax when taxes are working in their lives. In America, you feel so happy to pay tax because you can see that those taxes are actually working for you and your family. Now, double taxation most times is not intentional. Double taxation is a factor of broken system. And don't think that they are doing that because they want to. The problem here is that they are lazy, that they have not figured out how to actually overcome those they cannot reach. It's assumed that less than 20% of people that are supposed to be paying tax are paying tax in Nigeria. And they are always the ones that are overburdened. There are many that nobody gets asked to tax. So that's why I will understand that if a governor has increased IGR, the problem is that most times they don't expand the tax base. They only keep taxing those that are already taxed out of existence. And that is where we have to solve that problem. You know, like Kadab said here, I understand what they're doing in digital infrastructure in some parts of Africa. If we can bring that kind of visibility, you know what happens? Nobody will come and tax you. In America, you file your tax once a year. That tax, you are paying your federal tax. I'm talking of a company. You are paying your state, you are paying your local government. It's in one document. When they receive that tax, the federal is the one you file the state, but you can do all of them in two tax together. The state takes the one that belongs to the state. It hands over the one that goes to your local government. That's it. Just file one form. But because we don't even know how many we are, we don't even know our numbers, there is just no way any government at the moment in Nigeria can do that. So what they now do is we want to hit 1 billion naira. They have not hit 1 billion. They now say, let's go back to the same people we've gotten 800 million. Let's go and see if we can get 200. But there are people that can help them get that number. They can't reach them and they are not interested in reaching them. The biggest revolutionary thing that will happen in Nigeria is when we begin to charge property tax. But the problem is the people that are in power and are rich are the people that make that decision. So that means they have to pay tax themselves. But because they are the ones that will be affected, not the poor people, they don't want to do that. Do you know how much money Etiosa local government will be making for those mansions? Do you know how much money Abuja Municipal Council making in Maitama alone? Go back to your village. You know all those mansions they come and build and live in Lagos. I mean, in my own, I have a very big one. It's 24 rooms, very big. And no one has asked me to pay one single tax. That is not how to run a country. And that is where we need to get. So until we can have somebody who says, people, if you say you are rich, you have those mansions, at the end of every December, get ready in January, we're going to send you a tax of 1% of the total valuation of that house. So if that house is valued at 100 million naira, just as you give us 1%. Next year, you pay. Next year, you pay. Why do people who even bother to go to Abuja to ask for? Because governments all over Nigeria, from local to state level, have all the money they need from these property tax. That's what they do in America. That's what they do in Europe. That's what they do in every part of the world. That's what they do in Rwanda. That's what they do in South Africa. There is every part of Africa that has that is advancing. That's what they do in Morocco. That's what they do in Egypt. But in sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa and Rwanda, nobody wants to do that. So that is why they have to tax multiple, because they don't want to go to where the bulk of the money is. So let's take tenancy rate is our property tax. Unfortunately, tenancy rate is a property tax. I don't know clearly if you have a house in the village in Badagry, whether Lagos State is going there to assess the valuation of that house and ask you to pay tax. I don't know. There are people in this space, but of course, Lagos is always ahead of everyone. It could be that Lagos State is doing that. But I can tell you that nobody has come to my village to ask anybody to pay tax for property in other states. If they have come to your village or your family house and you paid tax last year, maybe you can tell us. Yeah. And remember that World Bank has been saying this, Nigeria has to do that. But the problem is anybody that does it, his party will lose election and he will not be re-elected. So you need a really crazy human being who can try that. But I'm telling you, some people even go to, if it requires going to church or mosque to pray against you, so you have to be fortified, because there will be battles that will be fought. Because, yeah. Okay, let's go to Apo, please. I think we're just rounding up here. And
Okay. Good evening, Prof. Good evening, everybody. So thank you so
just
much
hold on.
for.
Just hold on. Actually, the land use charges is based on property valuation. That's a very great comment because in Nigeria, nobody owns land. It's owned by the government. That is why I don't think you can use your land title to get collateral in a bank because it's assumed that your land, if it has not been developed, has no value because it's owned by the government under the Land Use Act. It's only when you have put a property on that land, that is when it has a value, right? Are there banks here, people that do this? So the land itself.
Prof, you can if it has C of O.
No.
Yeah,
if it has C of O, you can.
Okay, you mean the land itself without the
Yes.
property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But here they don't tax that land as a farm, like a land where you can actually be taxed to on the value of that land. Yeah. Okay. So that means that there's just so many a lot of things. So let's go to go ahead, please. There's so many comments here. But go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof.
Yes.
So my question is specifically around what you said about did with your time in investing in the stock exchange while you were working with Diamondback. So from what I can tell, currently most of the startups that we have always have like a significant valuation before they are like in the stock exchange for people to be able to invest in them. So aside from being able to know these people or know companies that you think have for significant growth, how can somebody like myself who doesn't have a lot of access to or who wants to invest in startups, I think will do well, listed on the stock exchange, and maybe I do not have access to the founders or management of those startups.
Okay, I'm just trying not to start making like we're promoting Tekidia Capital, but what you just said now is actually what we do. We work with the startups and we work with them on milestones. We know them for many months. Then when we feel they are made a milestone, we bring them to Tekidia Capital where most of our members invest in them. The fact is this, it's even easier these days to manage and understand these companies, what they do. Unlike in the past where information asymmetry was an issue. What is information asymmetry? There's something the startup knows, there's something you know, and at the end of the day, you don't know what the startup knows, the startup doesn't know. But today, if somebody says we are growing, say, hey, I will have my IT guy to have access to a dashboard. Say you have 30,000 users. It shouldn't be classified. We ask you to give us access to your dashboard. We go to access to your dashboard, we see 30,000 users. If you say you have processed 1 billion naira, we ask you to give us access to your dashboard. So what I'm trying to say here, unlike in the past when you are investing in mid-space companies, maybe investing in companies that there's just no way of somebody independently verifying it. Because of technology, visibility has improved, transparency has improved because most of these startups, they are required that the accounts they are using digital companies like Bumper, it just raised $4 million. What Bumper does is that it makes it easy for you to manage every aspect of a payroll accounting. Investors want that because if they have any doubt, they ask you for assets, they see that. And so there is Keeper and all these things. So the investor who understands what he's doing, I'm not saying there are not going to be issues with bad people, but it's just like you just don't want to put a little effort to actually. So let me share something here. There is Apollo Management wrote to us that they would like us to help them with some things from London. Apollo Management is one of the largest private equity firms in the world, and we the charts that we have to develop some protocols to see if they need certain metrics for the companies they would like to back or support. And you ask startup how many customer do you have? And we've not even seen the startups lying, because the problem we're having is that people are confusing maybe businesses of 20 years ago with the status of today. Like when you look at all these Paystack, look at all these startups you see working YC. Even if I don't log in into your account, there is a website I can use to track the number of people that come to your website. I don't have to have access. There is a place I know what's your traffic. You cannot tell me that you are growing in triple digits. I look at the traffic, the traffic has dropped. So how are you growing? So those are indicators. So what you need to do is go back to the richest man in Babylon philosophy, go to people that understand this. It's not everything that you need to understand. And there are so many companies that offer those services. You join their community, and if you have some money, you invest with them. And as you do that, I'm confident that you can also learn from the process. Yeah, so let's go to Mr. Cosmos, please. Go ahead.
Okay, Prof, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah. I want to ask two questions, actually. The first one is from your comments. You said if you have a house, maybe you have a house in the US, for instance, do you pay a percentage of the value of that house annually?
Yes, that is what they call property tax. Every year, your house has to be valued by the city.
Or they revalue it every year?
Yeah, they do valuation.
Oh, okay. So then the second question is, considering the way Nigerian Naira is falling, and the topic of this presentation tonight, which way can people who live in Nigeria, apart from investing in startup, be able to, and Eurobond that you have mentioned, which other way can people who live in Nigeria be able to invest in the US or maybe any other countries where the investment can be secured and not be devalued? Because you know, if you have, say, 1 million naira 2 years ago, and you had it in the bank, that may be about $20,000 or so. No, if you have 3.6 million 2 years ago, that's about $10,000. But today, that 3.6 million is I'm not sure if it's up to $400 or maybe 500. And so that money is still the same naira, but it's no longer the same value.
That's inflation. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
So which way can those who live in Nigeria be able to make investment in such a way that you're able to preserve your money from?
You can just buy US Treasury bill, but it's not going to yield anything. You just buy US Treasury bill. US Treasury bill is like the Nigerian Treasury bill, which doesn't yield much.
Okay,
so,
just that is.
Yeah, but he's risk-free, because for it to fail means that the US has collapsed as a country.
And you can just anybody can have access to it.
Yeah, you just this year and buy it. Yeah, everyone can have access to it. You just like you're storing that money. It's just like savings account, but a little better than savings account.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me show.
That, okay.
Go ahead.
Apart from that, would there be any other one?
Yeah, that's the major one, because
generally the interest rate is terrible. It's not really encouraging, though it's safe, like you said.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The same thing. Another one is also going to buy bond. You can buy corporate bond, but of course, bond is not also high. But instead of going to buy corporate bond in US, because once you make money, they still take their capital gain tax. You better buy Euro bond while in Nigeria, because Euro bond will pay you in USD, even though you are buying it in Nigeria. You get my point. Yes. But if you buy it in US, you buy bond, like companies, municipal, state governments issue bonds. You buy them, just like also So
Well,
we could take it offline, and
Yeah.
we're very happy to speak with you, just how you can provide that. So I think we are just
Thank you.
about 5 minutes yes to the time. We always do 90 minutes today. Yeah, this is the, let me see if I can show property tax. This is the property tax rate in US. New Jersey, I don't know if you can see my screen, Illinois. If you look at this property tax, if you look at the top rank, the top 20 ranked universities in America, most of their cities are in democratic states or the democratic cities. Okay, let's start. If you look at Princeton, Princeton is in New Jersey, New York area, is 100% Democratic. Look at Harvard, is in Boston area, Democratic. Name all those: California, Stanford, Berkeley, Johns Hopkins is in Baltimore. The top 10 universities in the United States, they are all in Democratic. And if you look at one factor, they have high property taxes. There is a correlation that by taxing all these hedge funds that build houses that are worth $90 million, that those states actually take so much money and use that now to develop public infrastructure. So they have better schools, better universities. But then there are states like the Republican states, they don't believe in this tax. So if you go to my list, Alabama maybe 0.43%, whereas New Jersey, Princeton area, maybe 2.something%. So taxation has a very, very high implication. And just trying to round up here. So you see Princeton is in New Jersey, which is a democratic state. That's the #1 ranked university. Massachusetts in Cambridge, which is Massachusetts, is also this democratic state. Harvard is in Cambridge, democratic city. Stanford is in California, blue state. Yale is in Connecticut. New Haven itself is a democratic city. Chicago, Illinois, so 100% democratic city. Johns Hopkins, my school, ranked I think #7 in the whole United States. Baltimore, I can just keep Philadelphia is a democratic city. Pasadena is democratic. By the time you go to the top 100 universities in America, you see that they are the most expensive in property tax, and they're democratic, and they have the best university systems in the United States. It is not a coincidence. I mean, I don't know if I can just keep going on. It's not a coincidence. What I mean is that they don't care. They tax those property tax. They have the money. They have the best funding for the universities. They have the best funding for infrastructure. But if you now go down to Alabama, Tennessee, and South Dakota, Mississippi, those are areas they don't believe in tax. They keep your money, I keep my own. Individual liberty. Don't come after the government. You cannot even name any school there because they don't fund those schools. They don't fund anything, but they don't have taxes. So you can extrapolate it to the Nigerian dilemma. You don't have efficiency of collecting tax, you can't do many miracles. Just like nobody remembers states like Alabama when it comes to innovation because they don't even believe in taxing anybody. Keep your own money, but nothing happens. But then you remember New York, you remember all these big universities where they come and take a big part of your money, but they use it to develop it and they create all these world-class cities. The top, if you look at the top 30 cities in the United States, more than 80% of them are democratic cities. Look at it. Even in Texas, which is a Republican state, inside one of their largest cities, Austin, I think it's a democratic state. So that's I think we can use that to close up. So Sam, go ahead. Just have a minute before we round up. So go ahead, Sam, go ahead.
Okay, sir, thank you for the opportunity. Sir, please, I want to ask first, if how do one become a member, or if one wants to join the Tekidia Capital, how do one get involved with it? Maybe as an investor, that is one. Two, my second question is, you've been talking about investment outside Nigeria. But I'm also looking at this fact. Isn't it possible for the agricultural sector to become so stable whereby people can invest in the agricultural sector without going out? Because in the agricultural sector, we have most of the best agricultural products
Okay,
in
yeah,
the world.
I get the question. So let me go straight. So this is go to capital.tequila.com. I think the website capital.tequila.com. You learn everything. We're actually on investment cycle, so you can join us. And capital, interestingly, we have a lot of members here. Capital.tequila.com. You can learn how you can register. Then on agriculture, let me say this, and that is also one of the problems we have in all these crowdfunding companies, where agropreneur, all of them, at the end of the day, there is a model we have in Tequila Capital, which is those crowdfunding companies in agriculture, their average lifespan before they collapse is 2.3 to 3.2 years. We have a model that if you start a crowdfunding company for agriculture, we know that you will not last more than 3.5 years, because there is no agriculture business you can do in Nigeria that will enable you to pay somebody 36% interest rate in a year. It's impossible. For you to pay somebody 36%, it means you have to earn 36% plus your running cost. And if you need to add some small profit, it means you have to be hitting at least 50% margin before you can pay 36%. So what they promise people is actually practically impossible, because there's no way agriculture is that very, very lucrative. You get the point I'm trying to make. So that is the reason why they keep collapsing and they keep promising people. But if you are in the business of trying to support and invest in agriculture, I will tell you one thing. Don't think that it is going to give you the same return like the fintech or the logistics companies. But the problem here is that if you have $10,000 to invest, are you motivated that if you invest in an agriculture startup, it returns maybe after 5 years, it's returning maybe 20,000, while a fintech, that 10,000 can give you maybe 500,000 or 400,000. So it's not patriotism then. It's a question of, it's your money. The Nigerian problem has to be solved, but that Nigerian problem has to be solved within your own outlook, because you are the one that earned that 10,000. We're not saying that agriculture is not great, but the problem, there are other sectors that deliver better value for investors than agriculture. So because you are not in the patriotism game, you're also in fiduciary game. You want to make money. People now begin to limit. We don't invest in farming because it doesn't deliver alpha. I wish there is a way we can do that, but we don't just think there's any way a farmland will deliver 4x in 2 years or 10x in 2 years. It's hopeless. Some people can do that, but we don't see it as a startup. So that is a problem. I'm sorry to say that. So that's the reason why, even if you beat all the drums in agriculture, not many people are putting money in it, because the biggest problem is not in the farming. The biggest problem is in the storage. And without electricity, you lose up to 37% of your harvest. Why would somebody do that kind of business? But if they fix electricity, I promise you, many of us will go into agriculture, knowing that no matter what comes out of it, there will be a processing plant that will not be run on diesel generator. So, gentlemen, ladies, thank you so much for your time. And we connect again next week. I want to thank you for connecting with us, Tequila. Of course, you already know that we started the next edition of Tequila. We're revamping our curriculum, also looking at new models for next year. Please tell your friends, and we'd like to have many hit at least 3,000 people registering next one. So have a great evening and good afternoon and good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Prof, thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Good evening,
Have a
Prof.
wonderful weekend.
Everyone, please, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, colleagues.